The recording doesn't start with panic. It starts with breathing. Slow, controlled, intentional. The kind of breathing someone uses when they're trying to stay rational. In the background, wind moves through trees, uneven and restless, brushing against leaves still wet from recent rain. There's no music, no dramatic cue, just raw sound. A man speaks. If anyone finds this, listen carefully. His voice is calm but not relaxed. There's tension in the way he holds his words, like he's measuring each sentence before letting it go. This isn't a distress call. It sounds more like a statement, something recorded on purpose. For several minutes he describes where he is without naming it. No street names, no landmarks. Just impressions, darkness, uneven ground, the smell of wet soil. This avoidance is subtle but meaningful. People under stress often simplify language. People who are performing tend to over-explain. He does neither. At 6:12, there's a pause, not a technical glitch. A listening pause. You can hear him stop breathing for a moment. When he inhales again, it's sharper, shorter. The cadence of his speech changes. His sentences become fragmented. He starts whispering, not dramatically but instinctively, as if volume itself could give him away. Then comes movement, a faint crunch behind him, too soft to identify, too real to ignore. The man doesn't react immediately. That hesitation matters. Fear takes a second to register when the brain is still deciding whether the threat is real. When he finally speaks again, his voice drops almost to nothing. He's standing behind me. The recording cuts off mid-breath. No struggle, no scream, just silence. And the most disturbing part isn't what's on the tape. It's that, according to every official record, the man whose voice you just heard was never supposed to be there at all. The recorder is found just after sunrise. Two local hikers are moving off-trail, cutting through a stretch of forest rarely used outside hunting season. The ground is soft, soaked from overnight rain, and every step sinks slightly into the mud. One of them notices something unnatural among the leaves, a small, dark rectangle, partially buried, its plastic casing scratched but intact. At first, they assume it's trash. Then one of them picks it up. It's a digital voice recorder, powered off, no identifying marks, no name, no case. What stands out immediately is how carefully it seems to have been placed, not dropped, not crushed, resting flat as if someone wanted it to be found. They call it in. Within an hour, deputies arrive and establish a loose perimeter. The recorder is logged as evidence, photographed in place, bagged, and transported to the station. Chain of custody is followed by the book, standard procedure for what is still believed to be a lost personal item. That assumption doesn't last long. A technician powers the device on. There's only one file, no accidental recordings, no test audio, just a single track, timestamped less than 24 hours earlier. Already that's strange. No missing persons reports have been filed. No calls about suspicious activity in the area. The forest itself isn't near any residential zone, campsite, or marked trail. There's no obvious reason for anyone to be there at night in the rain carrying recording equipment. When the audio begins playing, the room goes quiet. The deputies don't interrupt it. They don't take notes. They just listen. By the time the recording ends, no one is talking about lost property anymore. The tone of the voice doesn't match someone documenting a hike or leaving a reminder. It sounds deliberate, focused, almost rehearsed, but not in a way that feels fake, in a way that feels prepared. One deputy asks the question everyone else is already thinking. If this was an emergency, he says, why didn't he call 911? No one has an answer. And that's the moment the recorder stops being an object. It becomes a message. The next step is identification. The audio is forwarded to a forensic specialist trained in voice analysis. The goal is simple: determine age range, regional markers, and emotional state. The results come back quickly. Male, mid-30s to early 40s, Native American English speaker, no strong regional accent, which usually suggests either higher education or frequent relocation. What stands out isn't what he says, it's how he says it. His pacing is controlled. His sentences are structured even under stress. This isn't someone unfamiliar with pressure. There's no verbal spiraling, no incoherent rambling. Psychologically, that narrows the field. People who panic tend to lose narrative control. He never fully does. Then comes the unexpected hit. Using a national voice comparison database, typically reserved for active investigations, analysts run a speculative match. It isn't supposed to return anything. Most don't. This one does. The system flags a high-confidence similarity to a recorded interview conducted 3 years earlier in another state. The name attached to that file immediately raises eyebrows. Because according to every official record, this man was not in the area. No cell phone pings within 50 miles. No credit card transactions. No toll booth hits. No traffic cameras. No hotel check-ins. On paper, he doesn't exist in that forest. Detectives pull his file. Employment history is clean. Residential address current. No recent travel requests at work. No vacation time logged. His vehicle hasn't moved based on GPS data tied to insurance monitoring. When they contact him, he answers, alive, calm, at home. He denies being anywhere near the forest, says he spent the entire night alone. No witnesses, but nothing that immediately contradicts him. His tone is steady, cooperative. He doesn't ask why they're calling, another detail that doesn't go unnoticed. After the call ends, one detective replays the recording again. Same voice, same cadence, same pauses. This isn't a coincidence. The question now isn't who recorded the message. It's how a man can leave a voice in the woods without ever being there. On paper, nothing is wrong with him. He has a stable address, a steady job, and no history of violence. His employment records show consistency, no sudden gaps, no unexplained relocations. Coworkers describe him as private, focused, and methodical. Not cold, not warm, just controlled. That control matters. Psychologically, people who maintain rigid structure in their daily lives often do so to manage internal pressure. Order becomes a coping mechanism, and when that order cracks, it rarely does so quietly. Detectives review his past interactions with law enforcement. There's only one. A voluntary interview conducted 2 years earlier in connection with a financial dispute. No charges filed. No arrest. But the interview audio reveals something interesting. He speaks carefully, chooses neutral phrasing, avoids definitive statements. He knows how words can be used. Friends say he dislikes unpredictability. Family members mention his tendency to prepare for conversations in advance, even casual ones. One relative recalls him saying, "If you control the narrative, you control the damage." At the time, it sounded like a joke. Now it doesn't. There's another detail buried in his file. Recently, his name appeared in an affidavit connected to an ongoing investigation in another jurisdiction. Not a suspect, not charged, just a person of interest. The case itself is sealed, but the timing is impossible to ignore. Pressure is building around him. When detectives interview him in person, his body language is consistent with his reputation. Upright posture, minimal hand movement, direct eye contact. He doesn't fidget. He doesn't rush to fill silence. When asked directly about the recorder, he doesn't deny owning one. He denies using it. He says he records notes for work, ideas, reminders. He claims the device never left his house. When informed it was found in the woods, his expression changes not to fear but to calculation. He pauses, then asks a single question. "Do you have a warrant?" The room shifts. This is no longer about a recording, it's about intent. Detectives stop treating the audio as evidence of fear. They start treating it as behavior. The recording is replayed dozens of times, not for what is said, but for what happens between the words. Analysts focus on breathing patterns, speech rhythm, and moments of silence. These details are harder to fake than language itself. The first third of the recording is controlled. His voice stays level. His breathing remains nasal, steady, a sign of deliberate regulation. This suggests anticipation, not surprise. He knew he would be recording for a while. Around the midpoint, something shifts. His pauses become longer. Not random, reactive. He stops speaking when ambient noise appears, then resumes once it fades. This indicates genuine listening behavior. Someone pretending would likely continue talking to maintain narrative momentum. Then there's the whispering. He lowers his voice gradually, not suddenly. That transition matters. Fear doesn't flip like a switch, it escalates. The change aligns with real stress responses seen in high-pressure interrogations. His vocal cords tighten, words shorten. Syntax breaks down, but there's an inconsistency. He never names the threat. No someone, no man, no description, just he. This ambiguity could be trauma or it could be strategy. By leaving the figure undefined, the listener fills in the blank. The brain does the work for him. Another detail stands out. Despite rising fear, he never asks for help. No plea, no call-out, no instinctive hello into the darkness. That absence is telling. People who believe they are about to be harmed usually reach outward. He doesn't. Instead, the recording feels inward, reflective, almost documentary in tone, like he's preserving a moment rather than escaping it. When analysts isolate the final seconds, they notice something subtle. After he says, "He's standing behind me," there's no immediate physiological spike. No gasp, no shout. The recording cuts cleanly. Detectives stop treating the audio as evidence of fear. They start treating it as behavior. The recording is replayed dozens of times, not for what is said, but for what happens between the words. Analysts focus on breathing patterns, speech rhythm, and moments of silence. These details are harder to fake than language itself. The first third of the recording is controlled. His voice stays level. His breathing remains nasal, steady, a sign of deliberate regulation. This suggests anticipation, not surprise. He knew he would be recording for a while. Around the midpoint, something shifts. His pauses become longer. Not random, reactive. He stops speaking when ambient noise appears, then resumes once it fades. This indicates genuine listening behavior. Someone pretending would likely continue talking to maintain narrative momentum. Then there's the whispering. He lowers his voice gradually, not suddenly. That transition matters. Fear doesn't flip like a switch, it escalates. The change aligns with real stress responses seen in high-pressure interrogations. His vocal cords tighten, words shorten. Syntax breaks down, but there's an inconsistency. He never names the threat. No someone, no man, no description, just he. This ambiguity could be trauma or it could be strategy. By leaving the figure undefined, the listener fills in the blank. The brain does the work for him. Another detail stands out. Despite rising fear, he never asks for help. No plea, no call-out, no instinctive hello into the darkness. That absence is telling. People who believe they are about to be harmed usually reach outward. He doesn't. Instead, the recording feels inward, reflective, almost documentary in tone, like he's preserving a moment rather than escaping it. When analysts isolate the final seconds, they notice something subtle. After he says, "He's standing behind me," there's no immediate physiological spike. No gasp, no shout. The recording cuts cleanly. That suggests intent. Whatever he believed was behind him, or wanted others to believe, the ending was controlled. Fear may have been present, but control never left. With the audio analyzed, detectives turn back to the forest. They map the area inch by inch, treating the recorder's location as a fixed point. Search teams look for footprints, drag marks, broken branches, anything that suggests a second presence. But the rain has done its job. Whatever traces once existed are gone or indistinguishable from the surrounding decay. Still, something doesn't sit right. There are no signs of pursuit, no compressed soil indicating rapid movement, no disturbances consistent with a struggle. If someone had been standing behind him, close enough to provoke that reaction, there should be something left behind. There isn't. The first major assumption becomes the investigation's biggest mistake. Detectives initially believe the recorder was dropped in a moment of panic. That framing shapes every decision that follows. Search grids focus outward, as if the man had been fleeing. Time is spent looking for an escape route that may never have existed. Meanwhile, the possibility that the recorder was intentionally placed receives little attention. Surveillance footage from nearby roads shows nothing. License plate readers come up empty. Thermal drones deployed days later detect no residual signs of a campsite or overnight presence. The district attorney's office is briefed. Without a body, without a crime scene, and without proof of another individual, the case sits in a gray zone. Is this a criminal investigation or a psychological anomaly? One junior detective raises an uncomfortable question. If he wasn't running, she says, what was he doing all that time? The timeline doesn't support panic. The audio length combined with battery data suggests the recording lasted far longer than someone reacting to an immediate threat would allow. This wasn't a chase, it was a wait, and that realization forces a reframe. The forest may not have been the scene of a crime, it may have been a stage. The turning point doesn't come from the forest, it comes from metadata. A digital forensics analyst revisits the recorder's internal logs, not the audio itself, but the device behavior. Power cycles, buffer writes, file creation markers, details most people never think to question. The conclusion is immediate and unsettling. The recording did not start when the fear began. The recorder was powered on nearly 2 hours before the final moments captured on the file. During that time, there are no signs of movement consistent with travel, no jostling, no abrupt orientation changes. The device remains level, stationary, as if resting on solid ground. That means he wasn't walking, he wasn't running, he was waiting. When detectives align this with the audio, the narrative collapses. His early calm wasn't relief, it was preparation. The pauses weren't uncertainty, they were anticipation. He was allowing time to pass. Another detail emerges. The final seconds of the file show a clean termination. No impact noise, no sudden drop. The recorder didn't fall, it was turned off or allowed to stop naturally. That matters. In genuine threat scenarios, recordings usually end chaotically. A scream, a struggle, a sudden loss of control. This one ends like a sentence with a period. Detectives return to the location with fresh eyes. The placement of the recorder now reads differently, positioned for discovery, oriented upward, not hidden but not obvious. A message meant to be found but only by someone looking closely. The implication is unavoidable. The man wasn't documenting an attack. He was constructing a narrative. And if that's true, then the question shifts again. Not who was behind him, but who he needed to believe that someone was. Once detectives understand the recording's timing, focus shifts from the forest to the people who might have been meant to hear it. At first glance, the recorder seems like a cry for help, but metadata, placement, and voice analysis all point to something far more deliberate. Whoever recorded this intended it to be found, but by whom and why? Investigators examine ongoing legal matters connected to the man. A pending affidavit had recently been filed in a distant jurisdiction, naming him as a witness in a sensitive financial case. The stakes were high. Exposure could damage reputations, careers, even freedom. Timing suggests a correlation, not coincidence. Psychologists consulted by the DA offer insight. A controlled narrative, whispering, pauses, ambiguous pronouns is a classic tactic in psychological influence. It implies threat, evokes sympathy, and forces others to fill in the gaps. In other words, the recording could manipulate future investigators or recipients of evidence without ever revealing its creator's identity. Interviews with friends and colleagues reveal a pattern. The man had recently expressed paranoia about observation. "They're watching," he had said. "If you leave proof, you can control what they believe." Friends had assumed it was exaggeration. Now, investigators consider that statement literal. Detectives review the chain of discovery again. The hikers who found the recorder had no personal connection. The recorder's placement ensured visibility without drawing attention to him. This careful orchestration points to strategy over chance. Then comes the hardest conclusion to swallow. The threat in the recording may have existed only in his mind. The fear he expressed could have been self-generated, a method to construct a story, to influence outcomes, or even to satisfy an internal psychological need. The forest, the darkness, the sense of pursuit, all part of a crafted narrative. The real target wasn't a person standing behind him. It was anyone who would later find the recorder, listen to it, and interpret it as evidence. He turned fear into a message, a psychological weapon disguised as a survival story. And in that sense, the recording achieved exactly what he intended. After weeks of investigation, the case reaches the DA's office. There is no crime scene, no evidence of a second person, no forensic trace linking anyone else to the forest. The recorder is the only physical artifact, and the man's cooperation is total. Legally, there is nothing to charge him with. The DA determines that no premeditated murder, assault, or abduction occurred. The recording alone cannot prove intent to harm anyone. Case closed. On paper, the matter is over. But psychologically, the verdict is far more complicated. Analysts review the tape one final time. They note his composure, his control, his manipulation of narrative and perception. He created fear, not in himself, but in everyone who would later hear the audio. The final whisper, "He's standing behind me," was both real and artificial. Real in the physiological tension it evokes, artificial in that no one else was there. Detectives reflect on what they witnessed. They realize the forest was never a crime scene. It was a stage. The recorder was not evidence of victimhood, but of performance. The man had orchestrated the circumstances to generate a narrative, leaving room for interpretation. In doing so, he exploited human psychology, anticipation, imagination, and the innate fear of the unknown. Some questions remain unanswered. Why choose the forest? Why allow discovery by strangers? Was it to frighten the DA's office, to impress colleagues, or simply to externalize internal fear? The man himself offers no definitive answers, and the ambiguity is part of the power of the recording. Today, the man lives quietly. He keeps meticulous routines, maintains a low profile, and avoids media attention. The recorder remains in police evidence storage, untouched, yet always revisited. It is a reminder that control can be exercised without confrontation, and fear can be manufactured as easily as it can be felt. In the end, the final verdict is not legal. It is psychological. The forest holds no intruder, yet the presence of the voice lingers, a calculated echo that continues to haunt anyone who listens. The case is closed, the man exonerated, and yet the story does not end. The forest, once an empty stretch of trees and mud, now exists in the collective imagination of everyone who has heard the recording. It is a place of tension, fear, and uncertainty, a stage where the unknown can feel real, even when it isn't. The recorder sits in a secure evidence locker at the local police station. Technicians occasionally revisit it for training purposes, demonstrating how subtle vocal cues and environmental soundscapes can evoke profound psychological responses. To them, it is a lesson in human behavior. To the public, it is a mystery. To the man, it is a completed work, a narrative preserved without confrontation or explanation. Psychologists consulted on the case describe it as a rare example of controlled fear. The man induced tension in listeners while maintaining complete authority over his own physiology and speech. This level of self-regulation is uncommon and in some ways disturbing. It blurs the line between genuine experience and performance, leaving no way to definitively separate fact from craft. The forest is visited occasionally by hikers, unaware of the recording's history. Yet the legend has grown. Locals whisper of the voice in the trees, a man who once left his words behind like a ghostly presence. And though no one has ever seen him there, the impact of his actions persists. Fear has been externalized, captured on a small device, and replayed for anyone who will listen. The final question remains unanswered. If no one was standing behind him, then why does the recording feel so real? Why does the tension grip the listener, quicken the heartbeat, and draw the imagination into darkness? The truth, as always, is complicated. The man created a story, and in doing so, transformed a quiet forest into a psychological theater. The voice that should never have existed continues to echo, not through the trees, not through any physical presence, but through the mind of anyone who dares to listen. And in that way, the voice still exists, haunting, precise, and utterly in control.